Welcome all for the Sunday morning Bhagavatam class. Thank you. Thank you for being here. And please forgive me, I'm not dressed in proper Vaishnava attire because I'm visiting some friends and I forgot to bring my tilak. I understand that wearing tilak is such an important part of representing the parampara, especially when you're giving class. So I deeply apologize for the lack of my Vaishnav tilak and Vaishnav clothing. And I hope that you can still accept whatever little I have to offer, whatever imperfections I may have. Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9, texts. It's a whole series of texts, texts 30 through 50. So I'm just going to read the texts in series, and that way we can hear from Srila Prabhupada first. And then I'll share a little bit of what I was inspired to share about. We could actually go in a bunch of places, but I'll just read and then we can get into our discussion. So I'll start with text 30 from chapter 10 of Canto 9, and I'm just going to read the English translation. Thereafter, Lord Ramachandra found Sita Devi sitting in a small cottage beneath the tree named Simshapa in a forest of Ashoka trees. She was lean and thin, being aggrieved because of separation from him. Seeing his wife in that condition, Lord Ramachandra was very compassionate. When Ramachandra came before her, she was exceedingly happy to see her beloved, and her lotus-like mouth showed her joy. After giving Vibhishana the power to rule the Rakshasa population of Lanka for the duration of one kalpa, Lord Ramachandra, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Bhagavan, placed Sita Devi on an airplane decorated with flowers, and then got on the plane himself. The period of his living in the forest having ended, the Lord returned to Ayodhya, accompanied by Hanuman, Sugriva, and his brother Lakshmana. When Lord Ramachandra returned to his capital, Ayodhya, he was greeted on the road by the princely order, who showered his body with beautiful, fragrant flowers, while great personalities like Lord Brahma and other demigods glorified the activities of the Lord in great jubilation. Upon reaching Ayodhya, Lord Ramachandra heard that in his absence, his brother Bharata was eating barley cooked in the urine of a cow, covering his body with the bark of trees, wearing matted locks of hair, and lying on a mattress of kusha. The most merciful Lord very much lamented this. When Lord Bharata understood that Lord Ramachandra was returning to the capital, Ayodhya, he immediately took upon his own head Lord Ramachandra's wooden shoes and came out from his camp at Nandigram. Lord Bharata was accompanied by his ministers, priests, and other respectable citizens, by professional musicians vibrating pleasing musical sounds, and by learned brahmanas loudly chanting Vedic hymns. Following in the procession were chariots drawn by beautiful horses with harnesses of golden rope. These chariots were decorated by flags with golden embroidery and by other flags of various sizes and patterns. There were soldiers bedecked with golden armor, servants bearing betel nut, and many well-known beautiful prostitutes. Many servants followed on foot, bearing an umbrella, whisks, different grades of precious jewels, and other paraphernalia befitting a royal reception. Accompanied in this way, Lord Bharata, his heart softened in ecstasy and his eyes full of tears, approached Lord Ramachandra and fell at his lotus feet with great ecstatic love. After offering the wooden shoes before Lord Ramachandra, Lord Bharata stood with his stood with folded hands, his eyes full of tears, and Lord Ramachandra bathed Bharata with tears while embracing him with both arms for a long time. Accompanied by Mother Sita and Lakshmana, Lord Ramachandra then offered his respectful obeisances unto the learned Brahmanas and the elderly persons in the family. And all the citizens of Ayodhya offered their respectful obeisances unto the Lord. The citizens of Ayodhya, upon seeing their king return after a long absence, offered him flower garlands, waved their upper cloths, and danced in great jubilation. O king, Lord Bharata carried Lord Ramachandra's wooden shoes. Sugriva and Vibhishana carried a whisk and an excellent fan. Hanuman carried a white umbrella. Shatrughna carried a bow and 2 quivers. And Sita Devi carried a water pot filled with water from holy places. Angada carried a sword, and Jambavan, king of the Rakshas, carried a golden shield. O King Parikshit, as the Lord sat on his airplane of flowers, with women offering him prayers and reciters chanting about his characteristics, he appeared like the moon with the stars and planets. Thereafter, having been welcomed by his brother Bharata, Lord Ramachandra entered the city of Ayodhya in the midst of a festival. When he entered the palace, he offered obeisances to all the mothers, including Kaikeyi and the other wives of Maharaj Dasharatha, and especially his own mother Kaushalya. He also offered obeisances to the spiritual preceptors such as Vasishtha. Friends of his own age and younger friends worshipped him, and he returned their respectful obeisances, as did Lakshmana and Mother Sita. In this way, they all entered the palace. Upon seeing their sons, the mothers of Rama, Lakshmana, Bharata, and Shatrughna immediately arose like unconscious bodies returning to consciousness. The mothers placed their sons on their laps and bathed them with tears, thus relieving themselves of the grief of long separation. The family priest, or spiritual master Vasishtha, had Lord Ramachandra cleanly shaved, freeing him from his matted locks of hair. Then, with the cooperation of the elderly members of the family, he performed the bathing ceremony, Abhisheka, for Lord Ramachandra with the water of the 4 seas and with other substances, just as it was performed for King Indra. Lord Ramachandra, fully bathed and his head clean shaven, dressed himself very nicely and was decorated with a garland and ornaments. Thus he shone brightly, surrounded by his brothers and wife, who were similarly dressed and ornamented. Being pleased by the full surrender and submission of Lord Bharata, Lord Ramachandra then accepted the throne of the state. He cared for the citizens exactly like a father, and the citizens, being fully engaged in their occupational duties of Varna and Ashrama, accepted him as their father. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakata Bhyam Tadati Supadantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarane Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So these verses are beautiful verses describing the return of Lord Ramachandra from 14 years of being in the forest and going through everything that they did, with Ravana kidnapping Mother Sita and the search for Mother Sita, the war in Lanka, and all of that. This is the final return of Lord Ramachandra back to Ayodhya. And these verses are very meditative. As we read these verses, it's so beautiful to really welcome Lord Ramachandra in our own hearts, in in many ways, these verses are actually meant to evoke a sense of celebration, welcoming the Supreme Personality of Godhead back into our own hearts. So, as I was reading these verses, I was deeply meditating. I was looking at all the descriptions that and all the personalities that these verses were describing, and it seems that the concentration. Let me ask the audience a question: whose name did you hear the most in these sets of verses? Rama? Good. Other than Rama?
Ravan?
Ravana, no? This name is repeated a bunch of times. It was the name of Bharata. Bharata is the younger brother of Lord Ramachandra. And he was ruling the kingdom of Ayodhya on behalf of Lord Ramachandra when the Lord was in the forest, banished for 14 years. So today, I just wanted to spend a little time understanding the characteristics of the three brothers, Lakshmana, Bharata, and Shatrughna, who actually represent three very basic principles of service. And when the Supreme Lord appears, just like how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared, described in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna Varnam Tvisha Krishnam Sango Pangastra Parshadam Yagya Sankirtana Prayar Yajanti Sumedasaha. Yajanti Hi Sumedasaha. So the Lord appears with his Parshada. Parshada basically means his people. And in Lord Ramachandra's Leela, the Lord expanded himself as his own brothers. And his brothers were specifically embodying the principle of service to the Supreme Lord. And each of those three brothers, Lakshmana, Bharata, and Shatrughna, were embodying one very specific principle. So I wanted to spend a little time understanding and discussing what those principles are, and how we can, in our own lives, actually try to pray to these personalities to embody these principles. So the name Lakshmana. So Lakshmana was the youngest. Lakshmana and Shatrughna were the sons of Sumitra, the youngest of the four brothers. And so the name Lakshmana, the Sri Vaishnava Acharyas, the Sri Vaishnava Acharyas are very experts. They're experts in commenting on the Ramayana. And the Sri Vaishnava Acharyas explain how the word Lakshmana means Lakshmano Lakshmi Sampanno, meaning that Lakshmana was the person who was embodied with Lakshmi, fortune. Now, if you really look at Lakshmana's life, you'll actually see it's very confusing to read and understand how his life was full of good fortune. Because as soon as Lord Ramachandra was banished to the forest, Lakshmana basically decided to go with the Lord. He renounced the kingdom. He didn't have to. He didn't feel he didn't have to do anything. It was Lord Ramachandra who was actually banished to the forest. And so Lakshmana did not really have to go to the forest. He could have just stayed back in Ayodhya. But Lakshmana's immediate decision was, if Ram is going to the forest, there is no question of me not following Lord Ramachandra. The destiny of the servant is the destiny of, it's to follow the destiny of the master. Right? That was his spirit. And so when the Sri Vaishnava Acharyas comment on Lakshmana and call him Lakshmi Sampanno, the good fortune was not the good fortune of opulence. It was not the good fortune of the riches of the riches of the kingdom of Ayodhya. It was not even the good fortune of actually spending time with his own family. In fact, the banishing of Lord Ramachandra to the forest came very soon after the four brothers uh, were married. So when Lakshmana left the kingdom, he had he just left, not caring for the opulence, not even caring to spend time with his own family. So then why is he called? Why is Lakshmana called somebody with opulence? And the Acharyas explain that Lakshmana's opulence was um, the good fortune of uninterrupted service to Lord Ramachandra. And then the nature of the uninterrupted service is 14 years in the forest was actually filled with so much austerity. In fact, it's described in the Ramayana that Lakshmana did not even sleep a wink. He used to, in the morning, he used to go out in search of fruits and roots and berries to feed Lord Ramachandra and Sita Devi. And the rest of the day and at night, he used to actually sit guard. And there is a very beautiful painting actually of Lakshmana where he's sitting outside with his bow, and you can see on his face the the mood of unwavering service, the determination. It doesn't matter what the condition is, and I'm here to serve, and the destiny of my Lord is my own destiny. That's the spirit that Lakshmana embodied. So much so that even when so serving somebody like Lord Ramachandra was not an easy task. Lord Ramachandra is the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. And the specific incarnation of Lord Ramachandra is called Maryada Purushottama. Maryada Purushottama means somebody who embodies all the virtue of Dharma and would not forsake Dharma for anything. And when you're following somebody who's actually so dharmic, so dedicated to serving the Supreme Lord, and also living one's life in a very dharmic way, it is not an easy job to serve them. The standard of renunciation, and when I say renunciation, it's not just giving up wealth and giving up money. The standard of actually renouncing the ego is just so high that, yeah, it is very austere. So there is one instance in the life of Lakshmana, or in the past times, where after Sita Devi is stolen, so Lord Ramachandra very specifically instructs Lakshmana as he goes after the deer, who's actually a demon disguised as a deer. Lord Ramachandra chases after the deer, and before leaving, he instructs Lakshmana to make sure that Sita Devi is protected and taken care of. And then Lord Ramachandra leaves. And so Lakshmana, as a servant who's so steadfast in his service, he is standing guard. And at a certain point in time, when Lord Ramachandra shoots the deer, it's called Maya Mrigam. Maya Mrigam means it was an illusory deer. It was a demon disguised as a deer. And so when Lord Ramachandra shoots the deer screams out very loudly, disguising its voice as Lord Ramachandra's voice. It screams out very loudly, "Hey Sita, hey Lakshmana." And when Sita Devi hears this voice, she is very concerned. Naturally, she thinks it is Lord Ramachandra is in risk, is in danger. And so she tells Lakshmana, you should go and look for your brother right now. I think he's in danger. And Lakshmana he has so much faith in his Lord. He tells Sita Devi, listen, I know Lord Ramachandra. I know that this is the voice of a deer, that the demon disguised as a deer. This is not Lord Ramachandra. I know him really well. There is no living entity in this world that can actually bring any trouble to Lord Ramachandra. But Sita Devi, in her own anxiety, she actually becomes really upset. And it's understandable. She's in a lot of anxiety. And so she really chastises Lakshmana with very, very harsh words. She actually tells Lakshmana, I know what you are doing here. I think you want the death of your brother so that then you can enjoy me. And I know for the last 14 years, all that you have been waiting for is the right opportunity to enjoy me, to actually get rid of your brother and enjoy me. And these words were just so piercing to the heart of Lakshmana, that he couldn't bear to hear them. And so he tells Sita Devi, just because you are saying these words that are unbearable for me, I can't be here, so I should go in search of my brother. And he goes in search of Lord Ramachandra, and in the process, then Ravana comes and kidnaps Sita. And so when Lord Ramachandra and Lakshmana come back and find that Sita Devi is missing, Lord Ramachandra looks at Lakshmana and becomes so upset at him for leaving Sita Devi. And Lord Ramachandra chastises him and says, I gave you such a simple task, and you couldn't do this. You let me down. And you see the condition of a servant sometimes is that, and this is it's a very instructive lesson, that Lakshmana was questioned. His character was questioned by Sita Devi, and his competence was questioned by Lord Ramachandra. And you know what happens to you when your character is questioned and your competence is questioned? It is actually a very difficult place to serve. Lakshmana could have very well said, you know what, for 14 years, I served you without sleeping a wink. And this is what I get in return, to hell with the service. I'm leaving. You can find, it's so easy when we are misunderstood, for us to give up the spirit of service because we feel not reciprocated to. And the reason why the Sri Vaishnavacharyas called Lakshmana, or they describe, they speak about his name, Lakshmana, Lakshmano, Lakshmi Sampanno, Lakshmi Sampanna meaning, as I described earlier, one who is filled with good fortune, is because his good fortune was his spirit of unending, unwavering service to the Lord, so much so that even when he went through that heartbreak, he could never leave the side of his master. He considered all the austerities in his service as his only wealth and his only good fortune. He never left the side of his beloved Lord Ramachandra. So that's the spirit of service that Lakshmana embodied. Considering his heart was considering his service as his only opulence, and that's why he was called Lakshmana, because he was full of good fortune of unending service to the Lord. So the other brother's name was Bharata. Bharata comes from the word bhara. Bhara means to carry the burden. And the reason why, again, the Sri Vaishnavacharyas explained so beautifully why he was described as Bharata, as Bharata, one who carries the burden, or to carry the burden, because the burden that he had to carry was, again, very difficult. So after Lord Ramachandra was banished to the forest, the whole story around Lord Ramachandra being banished to the forest was Kaikeyi, who was the mother of Bharata, desiring the kingdom for her own son. Kaikeyi banished Lord Ramachandra so that her son Bharata could ascend the throne. And when Bharata, who was at that time when all of these events happened, Bharata was visiting the house of his uncle in Kaikeya Pradesh. Kaikeya Pradesh is actually now in the region of Russia. So when he came back and he realized that on his behalf, his mother had so badly misrepresented him, and it was on his account that Lord Ramachandra had been sent to the forest, his heart just broke into pieces. And he was so angry at his mother and so upset that he had been so misrepresented that in his heart, the only thing that he wanted to see was his brother coronated as the king of Ayodhya. And now, on his account, completely the opposite thing has happened. That his brother, the real love of his life, was actually banished to the forest. So Bharata goes to the forest in search of Lord Ramachandra to bring him back, and he goes there with the entire army, with all the military, with all the people of Ayodhya, to bring the Lord back. And when on his way, as he's approaching the Lord in the forest, Lakshmana looks at Bharata from a distance. He sees that Bharata is coming with the armies and with the population of Ayodhya to welcome the Lord back. And Lakshmana misunderstands Bharata in a very big way. He says that Bharata is here. He's very angry. Lakshmana is very angry, and he misunderstands Bharata. And he says that Bharata is here because he wants to finish the job. He's coming. He's brought this entire army to kill the Lord and to take over the kingdom so that there will be no more challenges for the rest of his life. So again, he was misrepresented first by his mother. He was misunderstood by his brother. And then Lord Ramachandra refuses to come back to Ayodhya. And so Bharata basically asks the Lord to give his sandals so that he can rule the kingdom on behalf of the Lord for the next 14 years. And so when Bharata carries those sandals back to Ayodhya, the scene is him carrying a burden. And the burden is the burden of responsibility, the burden of ruling the kingdom, which every single day Bharata experienced as such an austerity, because first of all, he had no desire for the kingdom. And the second thing is, ruling the kingdom was a reminder to him every single day of how the Lord was suffering in the forest because of what had been done on his behalf, because of what had been done misrepresenting him. And the third thing was to rule the kingdom without becoming attached to the power, the position of being the king, but doing everything exactly the way that Lord Ramachandra would have done, to rule the kingdom representing the full heart of Lord Ramachandra, which again is no small task. So Bharata, the carrying the burden of the austerity of that kind of service. So when we are performing service, many times we are misunderstood. Sometimes we are misrepresented. And so the natural desire is to, again, because the ego feels so hurt, the natural desire is to, and there are many inconveniences when we are performing service. And so the natural desire is to actually find the easy way out. The ego always is trying to find the easy way out. And Bharata represents the spirit of service that is willing to carry the burden of the austerity of serving. Because serving, if we were to really serve, that service will bring inconveniences. Like we see in our entire parampara, all the acharyas, they went through innumerable inconveniences because their service was very real. They gave their hearts to the Supreme Lord. And when we give our hearts to the Supreme Lord and the spiritual master, it is natural that there will be inconveniences. And Bharata represents the characteristic of embracing service with the inconvenience, and yet not abandoning the post. And one of the inconveniences that Bharata experienced was how to represent Lord Ramachandra without being attached to the honor and the prestige of being the king. So, as Mahaprabhu instructed all of us, Jare deke tare kaha Krishna upadesh amar agya guru hana tara desh, that one of the austerities that we have to perform in our own service of representing the Guru Parampara is to give others Krishna consciousness without expecting any honor in return. And sometimes when the honor comes, to not really think that this is mine, to not become attached, to walk that fine line of service without attachment to the prestige. It's a very difficult thing to do. And that is the inconvenience one of the inconveniences that we have to bear in our service to the parampara, which is actually represented by Bharata. And again, the meaning of the word Bharata is one who carries the burden of service in a dignified fashion. So that's Bharata. And the other brother, again, the last one, is his name is Shatrugna. And Shatrugna means one who kills his enemy. Shatru Ghanati iti Shatrugna. So why is Shatrugna called Shatrugna? He only kills in the entire Ramayana. We actually see how the only person that he's killing is one asura. So then the Sri Vaishnava Acharyas, they ask this question, so why is he called Shatrugna? And the answer that they give is the Shatru, the enemy of service many times is personal desires. And in this case, there is a very beautiful, they give evidence to support how Shatrugna put forth, or I would say actually put aside any personal desire in order to serve the servants of Lord Ramachandra. So there is the story in the Ramayana where after Lord Ramachandra was coronated as the king, the Lord received the news that a demon whose name was Lavanasura was creating a lot of disturbance in his kingdom. And so the Lord, as the king, he posed a question to his brothers. He said that I have been away from this kingdom for such a long time. And but this demon needs to be killed. So what should we do here? And in that question, the Lord was expressing his desire to stay in the kingdom and continue his ruling because he had a lot of work to do. And so Lakshmana basically said, well, you know the deal. If Lord Ramachandra doesn't go anywhere, I don't go anywhere. I stay here, I serve the Lord as his shadow. And as Kshatrugna was hearing all of this, he knew that Bharata would put up his hand and say, you know what, I will go. And in Shatrugna's heart, he was thinking that Bharata had stayed away from the Lord for 14 years. And in his heart, he was thinking that, I, as the servant of Bharata, I want Bharata to experience the personal association of the Lord. So I will go and kill this demon. So Kshatrugna, the meaning of the word Kshatrugna here was one who actually conquered his personal desire for being close to the Lord and choose to serve the Lord, even though it required for him to actually stay away from the Lord. So all the brothers had stayed away from the Lord, or I should say Bharata and Shatrugna had stayed away from the Lord for 14 years when the Lord was in the forest. And then Shatrugna willingly accepted the austerity of staying away from the Lord for another 20 years. It took him a while to actually seek out this demon and kill him, just so that he could actually serve Bharata, to actually serve the servant of the Supreme Lord. And so he's called Shatrugna because the desire to enjoy personal association of the Guru sometimes can be an enemy of service. And Shatrugna represented that particular quality where it doesn't matter, even if I have to stay away from the Lord or from his devotees, especially the spiritual master, for the sake of service, right? For the sake of serving the servant of the Supreme Lord. So that those are the names of the three brothers, Lakshmana, one who considered the good fortune of his endless service and his austerity as his only fortune. That's Lakshmana. Bharata, one who carried the burden of misunderstanding and inconveniences in his service to the Supreme Lord in a very dignified way. And the third was Shatrugna, one who killed his own desire for personal association with the Lord for the sake of serving the Lord's servant. So these are the three brothers of the Supreme Lord, and each of them embody a very specific spirit of service that when we learn how to pray for in our own service to our spiritual masters and the Supreme Lord, these personalities are very alive. And they also become very alive and personal when we can very deeply meditate on these qualities and pray that these personalities actually bestow the strength and the courage for us to embody these qualities in our own service. So that's all I wanted to share. Thank you all. If there are any questions or comments this time. Adi Purushottam.
You ever hear of a person named Morari Bapu? You know who that is?
Yes, I do.
Right. So he has a practice. He tells the story of the Ramayana without actors, without costumes, without music, without scenery. He just tells the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he travels around. I was stationed in Malaysia about 35 years ago. He showed up there. And he tells the story. I think it takes about a week. And it's 8 or 9 hours a day,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when he tells the story, you have to imagine an audience of hundreds or thousands of people weeping uncontrollably, moaning, crying out, tears, shedding tears, pulling their hair out, And here we hear this story, which is so profound and so beautiful and so filled with the glorious, loving sacrifices that these personalities perform. And I don't know if I shed even one tear during the whole thing. I mean, we just, okay. But for all practical purposes, if we had any sanity and we heard this and we didn't cry, we realize how, covered over and jaded we are, not to respond with like weeping and joyfulness. And, that Ramachandra came back after 14 years and the whole thing, and what the brothers did. And I'm telling you, I've seen again and again in the Bhagavatam class, everybody's just sitting there. Maybe I'm like myself, I'm up all night before this, I'm struggling to stay awake, but I'm not actually in the depths of my heart feeling, ecstatic, loving painfulness to hear these heart-wrenching details, but they are so beautiful, and it's all loving exchanges, So I just want to mention that. I don't know if anybody else, maybe everybody was shedding tears except me. I don't know. Can't really see them, but I know for myself, I know how if I was really a real devotee, how I could be responding to hearing that thing. Beautiful, beautiful class, amazing. And of course, the story of Ramayana is just so wonderful.
Thank you, Adi Krishna.
Anyway, I just want to share that, not even one tear. What's wrong with me? Well, glories to Prabhupada, Hare Krishna.
How glories to Srila Prabhupada. Well, sometimes I have also seen how audiences shed tears, and it can become very sentimental.
It could be just sentimental, right?
It happens a lot in India, where the tears are just very sentimental, and then people go about their lives, still.
They don't surrender to Krishna.
It doesn't really change the heart.
But there are people who just do sentimental. But I believe that there actually are devotees who respond to hearing these things and say, wow, I want to be a devotee. Wow, that's so sweet. That's so profound. That's so heart-wrenching. Let me follow in the footsteps of these.
I think part of our challenge also is the idealizing of basically what we do, even in our own Krishna consciousness. I've definitely been prone to it. We just think that the pure devotee is in a different category, and there is almost like the sense of like, well, but they were pure devotees. That was the Supreme Lord anyway. So, there's almost this barrier to really experiencing the humanness even of the great devotees, because that was just, and it's a story that happened a long time ago. There is a way in which psychologically we tend to dismiss and perhaps not even fully believe these stories. The Ramayana is a part of the history of India. It's called Itihasa. It's historical, but somehow we have our hearts have become closed to really experiencing these pastimes. So I appreciate your sentiment and your sharing, for like lamenting that.
Even in a mundane movie, people sometimes cry or are shocked by some danger that the hero is in. We become absorbed in the drama of the film and the characters and the things that are going on. But these are the real dramas and the real ways we could actually imagine responding by crying.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Did anyone cry? Did anyone cry?
Hi, Krishna. Just a timing. Hare Krishna. there's a, I don't know the value of this comment, but I was just thinking that maybe there's a continuum of crying. Maybe, we might not be shedding tears, but just thinking of Adi Purush Prabhu, who, is always so attentively and committed to this class, despite, spending all-nighters, in service. I feel like that is a type of crying also, because, a person could easily say, I've been up all night, nonstop service, so I deserve to go to sleep. But instead, I stay up and try to focus my attention as much as possible. And, others of us might, try our best to hear as best we can, so it's not like it's either there's no crying or there's lots of crying. I feel like there's degrees of crying, and to the extent that we're able to cry, it will enable us, it'll help us cry even more as we continue to cry in our own at our own particular stage. And something like that, I'm thinking. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, it's true. The important thing about these tears is that these tears are not cheap.
Mm.
They can't be cheapened. It's so easy to as we were discussing earlier, sometimes it's sentimental.
Sahaja.
Yeah, and there is no real change of heart. But the capacity of real tears is that they permanently change our life.
Mm.
When something affects us very deeply, there is a permanent shift that we go through. And we have to want that. We have to want that shift. We have to want that, that when we do hear these pastimes, that we actually get transported to the spiritual world, that's where we would want to be. And I can say for myself that it's scary to be in the spiritual world because I can't be the enjoyer anymore. So we have to want it, and we have to want it very deeply. This is Rupa Goswami in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu talking about laulyam and greed. We have to want the greed very deeply. These tears are not cheap.
Humorously, we remember, Kevala Bhakti, remember Kevala?
Yeah, actually, Kevala Bhakti, we talk about him all the time.
So he was saying that, it says in Shastra, unless you're weeping when you're chanting the holy name, it's a steel-framed heart, right?
Yeah.
So he decided that he was going to chant so intensely that he was going to shed at least one tear every day. So he was chanting japa with us in the morning. He was screaming and yelling and driving us crazy. We finally said, you got to go up on the roof. Nobody else can chant. So he went up on the roof, and 4 policemen came. They thought he was getting killed or somebody was killing somebody up there. Finally, we had to put him in the walk-in cooler in the basement to chant his rounds. But he was trying to squeeze out at least one tear,
Well,
funny guy.
Kevala Bhakti was very special. Yeah, I remember him very fondly. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Jai Gaur Premanande, Hare Hare.
Vasana Prabhu ki jai. We love you.
Hare Krishna, thank you. Hare Hare.